Hello, I'm Elliot Margulies. I'm with the Media Center, and I'm here to interview Joe Simitian, the candidate for Santa Clara County Supervisor, District 5. We invited all three candidates for the position, but even with repeated invites, we only got a response from Joe Simitian. So over the next 15 minutes, you're going to hear his positions on a number of questions that were submitted to me by a variety of community leaders. So I'm going to jump straight into it, Joe.
Sure.
The first question will be a hot potato, and it's
Okay.
HSR, high-speed rail.
Yeah.
It makes the headlines all the time here. And I'm wondering, as a supervisor, you've certainly been in the news around this issue before, but what could your role be, what your position might be?
Well, I think the role of the county supervisor is a relatively removed one with respect to high-speed rail, but there are some opportunities for members of the Board of Supervisors to weigh in on rail issues, either through the VTA, the Valley Transportation Authority, or participation on what's called the Joint Powers Board for Caltrain, the three-county entity that runs Caltrain and has that corridor responsibility. My position has been the same for some time, which is I support high-speed rail done right, which obviously leads to the question, what does done right look like? I have to tell you, so far, as we're talking here in the month of May, I still have concerns about both the proposal that has been put forward as well as the ability of the High-Speed Rail Authority to deliver. So you need the right plan, you need the right people, and we're trying to figure out now whether or not that's the case. I'm also, frankly, a little bit disappointed at the pressure to rush this decision through. The plan just arrived in the legislature April the 12th. The question was, could we get it done for our June 15th budget, even though it had arrived 3.5 months late? I said I thought this was too important to hurry, particularly given the recent changes. And that continues to be my position. But we've had a lot of folks, including the U.S. Department of Transportation Secretary Ray LaHood out representing the Obama administration, trying to give us a nudge. And again, my view is, look, it's a $68.5 billion proposal. I need to be sure I think it's the right plan and that the High-Speed Rail Authority can deliver before I'm asked to vote on it, let alone before I would be able to vote aye. So stay tuned, we'll see, but that's sort of the general outlook I have. I am proud of the role that I played with my colleague Rich Gordon in the Assembly and Congresswoman Anna Eshoo in getting the High-Speed Rail Authority to scale back their plan and come up with something more reasonable. We called for what we call a blended plan, which says get rid of the 60-foot viaduct. That shouldn't happen. Get rid of the notion that you're going to go somehow well beyond the right-of-way that Caltrain currently occupies. And why on earth would you want to spend money you don't have to cause more disruption than you really need to? And so we've made some progress. The authority says they've adopted the blended plan. There are still some important details to be worked out, though.
Okay, I'm going to switch topics
Sure.
to affordable housing.
Okay.
There's projections from ABAG that will have another 500,000 residents in Santa Clara County by 2035. So obviously, to make housing available for teachers and nonprofit workers and those that we don't want clogging all the freeways
Yeah.
and polluting our air, what can the county do to support affordable housing?
Well, the county doesn't do a lot of residential development inside the unincorporated county where growth for the most part is not permitted. For the most part, the notion is incorporated communities, the 15 cities and towns in Santa Clara County, should be the place where the growth takes place. That's where the infrastructure is, the streets, the parks, the schools, excuse me. And so the county's role is relatively modest in terms of housing, but there are ways you can be helpful. I certainly pushed for support for homeless services when I was on the Board of Supervisors back in the late 90s. When Stanford developed its campus, we wanted to make sure there was adequate housing as part of that development. We supported the creation of a housing trust fund that was countywide in its perspective. So there's a role there, but not as much as might be thought because of the fact that most of the housing development in the county appropriately takes place in the incorporated cities and towns.
Well, let's go to the probably the biggest area of concern, at least most common one, is the budget. And so I'll let you tell us what is your approach to balancing the county budget and what programs and services would get the highest priority?
Well, You know, I was actually at the county in the late 90s when things were relatively manageable in terms of the budget situation. The late 90s were a more prosperous time for the region and the state generally, and the county was the beneficiary. Given the tough situation on budget front on a statewide basis, you know, all of that ends up rolling downhill and landing on the county. I think the county is going to be making hard choices about what it does and doesn't do, but it's also going to have to sort of rethink the way it does business. When I was on the board in the late 90s, one of the first things I did was ask the folks who do management audits for the county, hey, could we take a half a dozen of your unimplemented recommendations and see if there are ways to either make money, save money, or do things more efficiently? We were able to do that then, and I intend to ask the same question when I go in. You know, bottom line, if you don't have enough money, you got to spend less and raise more and try and bring them into balance sooner rather than later, because the longer it goes without being addressed, the worse it gets. But the county doesn't have a lot of ways to raise revenue. The counties are not given that authority. So we're going to have to spend less where need be, because that's just the imperative. But we also ought to be looking for ways to do the job differently or more efficiently, rethink the way business gets done.
But are there certain programs that get a higher priority in your
Well,
mind?
no, I mean, the county, because of the fact that the funding streams come for particular services, there's relatively little discretion. So, you know, criminal justice money for the most part gets spent on criminal justice. It can't be spent on health and welfare. Health and welfare money gets spent on the health and welfare program. So there's not as much discretion as I think people might think or hope for in terms of where you move limited resources. A relatively modest amount of the county's more than $4 billion budget is discretionary. Most of it stays within the particular slot for which it was originally allocated.
Well, then let's talk about costs of healthcare, because it's not just in our county, but all over the country. That's probably one of the major, especially for county
Right.
Costs. And what can you do as a supervisor to encourage or come up with innovative ways to make it work cheaper?
Well, I do think, you know, if there's one thing we know for sure, it's that prevention is less expensive than treatment once there's a significant problem. So trying to drive as much of the county funding as we possibly can, given the limited discretion, to prevention, to outpatient care, to clinics out in the community so that people don't show up at the Valley Medical Center, the hospital that the county is responsible for, requiring the very expensive emergency room care or acute care that would be provided elsewhere in the hospital. That's a smart way to go. But the pressure is always there to economize, quote unquote, by not spending on some of those preventative care measures, and then you discover that the nickel you save today costs you $1 tomorrow. So prevention is key.
At the same time, is there a special way to deal with, we have obesity issues, we have diabetes issues, and maybe particularly in minority populations. Does the county play a role?
It absolutely does, and it's called the health and hospital system because it's not just the hospital. There is a broader network. There's a public health officer who plays a role. There are mental health services that are provided. There are substance abuse services that are provided. There's a network of community-based nonprofits who in some cases are frankly better equipped, more nimble in terms of their ability to respond to circumstances out in the community. But there's always that tension because within the healthcare arena, there are always going to be people who say, no, we need more money over here rather than over there. And that's a tension that'll be there as long as there are too few resources, which I expect to be a while.
Well, May happens to be National Bike Day, Bike Month, sorry. And so we wanted to throw in a question. Congestion of the roads is something we want to get beyond, and the health benefits of biking are there. Is there something that a supervisor can do to promote alternatives to cars?
Yeah, I think the most obvious place where that can happen is the county does have a road Department of Roads and Airports with responsibility for county roadways. And while I served there in the late 90s and in my work since in the legislature, I have always been mindful of the fact that apart from the recreational cyclists who are numerous in our part of the state, there are significant numbers, modest but significant numbers of folks for whom cycling is their form of transportation. And I know going back years, the North County area that I hope to represent on the board has had a particularly high concentration of folks who use their bicycle for transportation, not just for recreation. So we need to be mindful of that as we build and then maintain county roadways to make sure that they're bicycle friendly and that they are accommodating of the number of folks, again, more significant in our area than most other places, who really are going to be serious cyclists in terms of transportation on a daily basis.
So another subject totally different. And I don't know, maybe you played a role in this in the state legislature and the state senate, but the counties are expecting an influx of prisoners to the county jails. What kind of planning needs to be done to accommodate this?
The technical term for this is realignment, meaning that we're going to realign some of the responsibilities that have been at the state level and have the folks at the local level take on those responsibilities going forward. The critical concern I have is will the money follow? Because I think people are understandably and appropriately nervous that they'll get the responsibility, but they won't get the money from the state that's necessary to do the job. So that's concern number one. I actually do think it makes more sense for these things. We're mostly talking about having lower level offenders do their time in county jails rather than prisons. And we're also talking about having folks at the county level have responsibility for what's called post-release supervision. In other words, what happens when somebody's out the door. And the county, frankly, is better equipped, in my judgment, to provide those services. I think there's a greater connection at the local level with the population that you're working with. The state has, frankly, got a dismal record on recidivism in terms of the number of folks who return to the state prison system. Our recidivism rate is about 70%, one of the worst in the nation. So, you know, if 2/3 or more of the people who walk out the door are simply coming back in short order, that's not a system that's working. I think it can be done a better way at the local level. But the money has to follow.
Is that something that you see a role for drug rehab programs?
Oh yeah, those are. I mean, those are the services. Whether it is mental health services, substance abuse services. I mean, one of the things, and you know, I learned this when I was at the county for 4 years, and you look at the jail population in Santa Clara County, which then was hovering around 4,000 people. It's lower now, but and just you know, far too many of those folks are really there for what are mental health or substance abuse issues rather than you know, criminal conduct per se. You know, a lot of bad actors who are there for criminal conduct and who should be there for criminal conduct, but you know, you're not using your limited dollars very smartly if your county jail cell is your, quote, mental health or substance abuse program. So using those programs more smartly, I think is both more cost effective, but I also think it's going to be more effective in actually addressing the root problem.
So I'd like you to talk about Joe Simitian and just say, in your nutshell, why is it that you're the person who can provide the leadership as our county supervisor?
Yeah. I think, number one, I've done this job before, and I think people would tell you I did it successfully. I also now have the benefit of 12 years at the state level where I have a depth and breadth of understanding that I could bring to the job this time, which would be very helpful because, as you know, the state and the county are really intertwined in terms of the job responsibilities. So I think having done the job successfully once, having now had the benefit of that work at the state level, also, frankly, knowing the district. I have represented every one of the communities that is in this district in the past. I am no stranger to any of them, and the challenges and the issues that are important in these different cities are not unfamiliar to me. I think that's important as well. But then I would also just say I think people will tell you I have a reputation as being effective in the work I do. I think government is about helping people and solving problems. And I think I have a good track record of helping people and solving problems. I think the public is understandably frustrated with what they see as gridlock on the partisan scene at both the state and national level. And the question I hear more often than not is, why can't you people, which is never a good start to a conversation, why can't you people just solve problems? And one of the things I'm looking about at the County Board of Supervisors, which is nonpartisan, is the ability to roll up your shirt sleeves, sit down around the table, or at least at the semicircular dais, and figure it out, solve a problem, deliver services, and move on. I think my track record suggests that I am the person who can do that and best serve the people in the 5th Supervisorial District.
Well, I want to thank you for sharing your positions in this forum. I want to thank you, the viewer, for taking the time to get informed and make a wise decision in the voting booth. And remember to go to that voting booth on June 5th. So from the Media Center, thank you very much.